And the way that began, unbelievably enough, I was sitting at my desk in my office when I lived outside of Philadelphia, and I received an airmail letter. And this letter was addressed to me at work, had my name on it. It was a mystery letter. And inside was a letter, handwritten letter, from a young man. And the stamp on this letter was from Malawi. Believe me, I had no idea where Malawi was. The first thing I did was grab a map and look and see where Malawi was. And when I discovered it's in Southeast Africa, first thing that dawned on me was, I don't know anybody in Malawi. I have no idea why somebody would be writing me. I thought maybe in my travels, an airport baggage handler had taken my address, but that doesn't explain why the letter came to me at work and not at home. So I'll read the first couple lines from the letter. It says, "Hi, brother. Firstly, I want to know your life. How are you, and how is life there? To say about me, I am very well. I'm a single young Malawian boy of 25 years of age. And I write this letter to tell you that I'm very glad indeed." This letter was written by a young man in Lilongwe and purposely sent to me. Now, I kind of thought that there was going to be a chain letter kind of line in it. I kind of thought that it was going to say, send me money, send me books, give me something. That never came. It was just a friendly letter. Now, I was baffled. I showed all my coworkers, and I was like, somebody from Malawi wrote this to me, introducing himself. What I had discovered a few months later was that I had donated some clothing to the Salvation Army. And in the pocket of one of those shirts that I had donated to the Salvation Army was my identification badge from work. And this is where my nice presentation was, showing that somehow my badge went from a small town near Philadelphia, somehow ended up in a shop vendor's shop in the Lilongwe, Malawi. This young man, when he was unpacking his clothing, his new clothes shipment for the day, saw it drop to the ground. He picked it up and he said, "Michael Kirkpatrick, I'm going to write this guy." And he did. And for the next 2 years, me and a young man named Victory continued to write each other back and forth for about 2 years. Now, this same story I told to friends of mine at church. How I was getting these letters from a guy in Malawi, how my badge had traveled all the way there. And they told me, this is your lucky day. We have a friend from Africa who is visiting us, and you can actually meet a real live African. So I didn't think it was too comical, but I was intrigued. I mean, they saw the connection that I had, and they thought, well, maybe you'd like to meet somebody from Africa. This gentleman, his name was Richard Kabazi, and he is from Uganda. And Richard Kabazi was in the U.S. raising awareness and telling us about the organization that he had started back in the late 80s. At that time was when HIV/AIDS really became devastating in that part of Africa, in East Africa, specifically in southern Uganda. Richard explained to us about the orphans. He explained to us the impact, devastation, the children that were being left behind. And he was starting his own child sponsorship program. Now, he had told us his life story. He told us how he left Uganda in the 1970s, much like what Diana said. When somebody mentions Mugabe, they say, Zimbabwe. Or when they say Zimbabwe, they say, often when people say Uganda, they go, ah, Idi Amin. So Richard had left in the 70s because of Idi Amin. He came to the States, but in the late 80s, he saw the impact that AIDS was having on his country. He gave up everything he had, living a comfortable life in the US, to return to Uganda to start a hospice care with his wife. After a few months, Richard realized that no matter what he did to ease people into death and to give them a death of dignity, his children were still going to be left behind. And quickly he realized he needed to change his mission. He needed to change his mission to take care of the children that were being left behind. So he told us this story. And of course, my beautiful wife, the heart that she has, was ready to sponsor a dozen kids. She said, sign us up. We're going to sponsor all these kids. Give them a great future. I, on the other hand, am a very skeptical and cynical person. I've seen the television commercials. I've heard the begging from white Westerners. I've seen the commercials for, and I am not knocking any of these organizations, but I have seen the commercials for World Vision. I've seen the commercials for Compassion. I have seen the commercials for UNICEF. Every time I fly on a plane international, I see, change for the future. Drop your change in the envelope. I've seen Samaritan's Purse. I've seen World Relief. I've seen them all. My question was, what makes this guy any different? Everybody wants to stick their hands in my pocket and take my money. I want to know more. So Richard, kindly enough, accepted our invitation to dinner. And when we invited Richard to dinner, we sat down and I grilled this guy. I asked him all kinds of questions. Where does the money go? What kind of car do you drive? What kind of house do you live in? How much does it take to really benefit one of these children? I kept asking him questions. Till at one point, Richard stopped. He said, Michael, go get me a calendar. And this was in about March of 1998. I got him a calendar. He opened it up to March. He goes, here's today's date. Flip through April, flip through May. He got to June, put his finger down on a date, and he said, on this day, I am picking you up at the airport in Entebbe. Because for every question I ask or answer, you have 20 more. This will never end. The only way that you will understand is to come for yourself. So in June of 2008, I stepped off a plane in Entebbe, Uganda, bags in tow, my new bride, and I wasn't in America anymore. I was in a whole new land. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just wanted to find out what I could do and what I can learn. And I tell you what, everybody who goes, whether they're missionaries, whether they're people doing humanitarian work, think that they have to be prepared and educate the ignorant to save the Africans. I learned more and I was mentored, I learned more wisdom, and I was changed more from my African friends than I could ever change them. When I came back, I was a changed person. I looked at things differently, started to kind of think about my life, kind of changing my priorities. But further, what can I do? A lot of people come back from going to Africa, and the first thing they want to do is start an NGO. They want to start a charity. They want to also help the kids. They want to further divide the pie. There is only a set amount of money in this world, and everybody wants to start a charity, and everybody wants to start an NGO, and make the slices of pie smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I didn't want to be a part of that. So when I came back with all this passion and fire, I knew the last thing that I wanted to do was start another organization. So I continued just learning, educating myself, reading about Africa. Western schools are notorious. To us, African history is learning about Egypt and the pharaohs. And that's it. I wanted to educate myself. I wanted to learn. I had a great sensitivity toward everything Africa. I had a great sensitivity toward Uganda. So when I came back, a few weeks later, standing on the stage at my church was a gentleman from Rwanda. I listened to him with deep attention. He told us that he was a survivor of the genocide in 1994. If I've ever met a gentleman who would have every right to be bitter, to be angry at the world, and to despise the evil that exists, it would be this gentleman. But he turned that experience into an organization that is called African Leadership and Reconciliation Ministries. It's a Christian-based organization. But he saw one of the root causes of the genocide is lack of leadership training, and also the need for reconciliation. His organization now is in 11 countries in Africa. They participated in the post-election violence in Kenya. This is a gentleman who took a life experience and is making a difference in the world and people's lives. So Celestin and I became fast friends. I learned a lot about his work, what he was doing. So in the year 2000, when my wife and I went back to Uganda, we learned a little more. We kind of looked at Africa a little differently as we started to educate ourselves. When we came back from that second trip, again, I had heightened sensitivity. I wanted to learn more. I was looking at websites. I was reading every day. I was reading the BBC Africa. I was reading The Nation in Kenya. I was reading the New Vision, the Monitor in Uganda. I wanted to see what was going on in the land of my friends. So I kept up with current events. In one of those in one of those websites connected to the Monitor, which is one of the main newspapers in Uganda, there's a chat room attached to it. So I thought, what the heck? I want to see what these Ugandans are talking about. So I'd go in and kind of be a passive watcher to chat conversations. And occasionally I'd chime in. And in any chat room, there's a lot of nonsense that goes on. A lot of the Ugandans that were in that chat room were either people in the diaspora, in Europe, in Canada, in the US, or they were people back home in Uganda. There was one person, one ID, that over the course of several weeks and several months, I kept seeing. He wasn't talking nonsense. This man made great sense. He had great insight. And we connected on an intellectual level on many topics. The one thing about a chat room is you don't know what somebody looks like, you don't know where they're from, you don't know if they're male or female, you don't know if they're old or young, you don't know their level of education. It is the great equalizer. So finally, after several months, we decided, you know what, we feel comfortable enough with each other. Here's my name, what's your phone number, where do you live? That gentleman that I was speaking to in that chat room is the artist whose artwork you see in the corner, and his name is Fred Mutebi. At the time, Fred Mutebi was a Fulbright scholar. He was teaching at a university in Memphis for a year. He would get lonely to speak his own language of Luganda, and the only outlet that he had to speak his language or to type it was to go into this chat room. And here I am, a white guy living in Dallas, saying, I want to meet this guy. So the next time Stephanie and I went to Africa, we now had another friend. We added Fred Mutebi to our list of friends. We got to see how he produced his beautiful artwork, went to his studio, got to know his family. We again visited the children that we had met in our first two trips. We visited our friend Richard Kabazi. Fred also told us about his vision to use art to teach children. He created an organization called Let Art Talk that teaches principles, life skills, life principles. He doesn't just take art and have kids out in villages or in schools draw pretty pictures. He uses art as a vehicle to teach kids things like persistence, perseverance, setting a goal, letting obstacles get in your way. But he also discovered that a lot of these kids are incredibly creative. They can paint. There's kids 10, 11 years old. They're doing woodcut prints, just like Fred. He teaches them how to do them. He's working with a lot of the children affected by AIDS. He's working with a lot of the children that formerly abducted child soldiers from northern Uganda, children that are living in extreme poverty. And this is a whole world that these children have never been exposed to. So he goes out to the villages. He brings some of these children who have never been outside of their villages to Kampala. And these kids love it. He's doing all this with his own pocketbook. He's doing it all with his own wallet. He is not World Vision. He's not Compassion International. He doesn't have commercials. He can't get an ad on an airline. He doesn't have billboards. He does it because he has a passion. And he is a stakeholder in his own country. He knows what the future is for his country. He personally doesn't get involved in making an impact. So now when I came back from visiting, this was after my, well, losing count here, but this was after my 4th visit to Uganda. I was on fire. I was telling people about Fred Mutebi. I was telling people about the organization that Richard Gabazi started, which is called AROAD, African Rural Outreach and Development. And I was trying to kind of raise awareness for them. Well, in the meantime, I had moved from my corporate office job in Philadelphia to Dallas, Texas. I was living large. I was doing pretty good for myself. Me and the wife, I was pulling in a 6-figure salary. We were doing pretty good. I worked for 20 years for a single company. I'd worked my way up the food chain in the company, and this company had begged me to move to their corporate headquarters. I obliged. I went. And then in 2007, they told me to leave. They let me go. That was devastating. The first thing, when I went home and I told my wife I had lost my job, first thing she said to me was, go to Africa. I spent a year with the support and the blessing of my wife. In 2007, I went to Uganda twice. I went in June of 2007, came back, decided I wasn't there long enough, didn't do enough, and I just wanted to go back. So I went back in December of 2007. In December of 2007, which means I missed my wife's birthday, I missed Christmas, and I missed New Year's away from my wife. And she gave me her blessing to do it. So I got to be in Africa for those holidays. Got to call my wife on my mobile in a village and wish her a happy birthday. It was during those 2 visits that, again, I was further impacted by perception, by what we are fed in the Western media. And this time I saw it, the reality of it. This time I had traveled to northern Uganda, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with what's been going on for the last 20 years in northern Uganda with the Lord's Resistance Army, with Joseph Kony, with child soldiers. But from 1986 to about 2004, it was just a horrible situation. There have been organizations born out of that turmoil. There are some wealthy organizations, wealthy NGOs in America that are trying to tell that story to raise funds and raise awareness. They continue to do it to this day. I went to Gulu. There is no more war. There is no more night commuting. There are no more child soldiers. The aftermath is there. They are rebuilding. They are getting their lives together. Children still need to be counseled. They need to go to school. But there's no more. The things are being promoted to raise funds, to tug at the heartstrings of Westerners, to get the emotional response isn't happening anymore. And when I went and I saw that, I couldn't believe it. I stood in the roundabout in the middle of Bulu, and my friend said, Michael, take a guess how many NGOs are in Bulu. And I stood at the roundabout and I did a 360, and I said, I don't know, 50. I said, Michael, there's more than that. I said, oh, okay, I'll be crazy. I'll double that number, 100. He said, Michael, there is more than that. I said, now I'll really be crazy. I'm going to double that, 200. I said, Michael, there's more than that. He said, Michael, registered here in Uganda, in the city of Bulu, there are about 300 NGOs registered. And I looked around again and I said, what the hell are they doing? There should be a new city built. There should be infrastructure, there should be roads, there should be new homes, there should be all of these things. To this day, I don't know what most of the NGOs are doing. I know there needs to be health care. I know there needs to be some trauma counseling. There are many organizations doing wonderful work. But it dawned on me then that I'm not going to fall for it. I, for myself, learned to trust my African friends. I learned for myself to listen. One of the things I've learned in my life, even though I like to speak, even though what I believe is the part of me that's African is I'm a storyteller. One of the things that Africa taught me is that I need to listen. And when I listen, I could hear them tell me things. And since I do not represent a government, I do not represent a charity, an NGO, I don't represent a business, I'm just a global independent citizen, I tend to have more sincere and honest conversations with people. And they shared things with me that really allowed me to understand things from their point of view. And one of my passions now is I love to see Africans helping Africans. What I did was I turned all my African friends that are trying to do things on the continent, whether they're here in North America, whether they're in Africa, lending my time, lending my skills. I helped some of them make brochures. Became a graphic artist to do brochures and announcements for them. I created logos to help them promote their businesses, to help them do different things. And I also taught myself for Fred Mutebi and some of my other friends. I'd never designed a website before. Decided to learn web design. What better way to tell the world about what my African friends are doing than to create a website so anybody in the world can see it. With that, just 3 quick people that I've met along the way. One young man was a young man who you would call one of the lost boys of Sudan. His name is Dang. I met him in a Kinko's coffee shop in the U.S. Dang is as dark can be, and he's confined to a wheelchair. Dang walked so much in the period of a year when he walked from southern Sudan and he walked to Ethiopia, lived in a refugee camp, went back to Sudan, and then walked to Kigoma, refugee camp in Kenya. He walked so much in his lifetime he lost the use of his legs. But he didn't let that deter him. Dang now in his wheelchair is helping to rebuild southern Sudan. And he doesn't complain. And he taught me the difference between having dead legs or a dead mind. And Dang to me is an inspiration. One of the other people I've met, her name's Monique. She started an organization. She's in Acholi. She started an organization called Quach Academy. She's another example of an African helping Africans. The last gentleman his name is Maurice Kiria, an incredibly talented singer-songwriter. This young man is poised to become a global superstar. And he's from Uganda, very humble man, but incredibly talented. And what I decided that I wanted to do with my passion is pretty much become a crusader to leave the politics to the politicians, leave the stories about Africa to the celebrities, and help to promote the arts and entertainment on the continent, and to help promote travel and tourism on the continent. Because I know what the arts and entertainment did for me in changing my perception of Africa, and what just going to Africa did for me. So, again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I wish there were more people represented, but have no fear. I will take the same message, and everybody that crosses my path will hear it. And I would love to just invite everybody that I come in contact with just to go and see for yourself. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure we'll all agree that Michael is a true storyteller.
Simba bakesa, abana bakesa, babe kibuli, babe kisubi, babe nsambya, babe kisugu, babe banda, babe mengo.